With the Switch 2 on the horizon, there are some existing games that are confirmed to be getting free updates, while others are offering paid upgrades to take advantage of the new hardware. In this video, I'm going to go over a list of games that I believe deserve an update for the Switch 2, whether it's better resolution or smoother frame rates or even new features. So let's get right into it. First, I want to dive into some games that might seem like obvious candidates for performance upgrades on the new Switch 2, specifically the hack and slash titles available on the Switch. Starting off with Astral Chain. Astral Chain is an underrated gem on the Nintendo Switch, developed by the well-known Platinum Games. This is a game that delivers fast-paced and stylish combat, where you're also controlling two characters at once. This game has beautiful, seamless animations that deserve higher frame rates and higher resolutions. This game would look and play beautifully on the Nintendo Switch 2. Right now, this game only gets about 30 frames per second at 720p, sometimes dipping into the 20s in more demanding moments of the game. Maybe we could get this game up to 60 frames per second at 1080p on the Nintendo Switch 2, and that would be awesome. Next, I want to highlight another Platinum game gem, Nier Automata. Now, this game is a miracle port for the Nintendo Switch. Virtuos Studios' ability to get this game to run on the Nintendo Switch at 1080p and 30 frames per second is extremely impressive. But with the freedom of the new hardware on the Nintendo Switch 2, I want to see this game in all of its glory. I want to play it at 60 frames per second like the other consoles can. I want to see it at higher resolutions. That's really all I'm asking for. Now I want to mention one more Platinum game title, and it's a big one, Bayonetta 3. When this game launched, it was clear just how ambitious it was for the Nintendo Switch. It almost felt like Platinum Games expected the Switch 2 to be out by the time the game released. That said, Bayonetta 3 targets 60 frames per second, but in practice, the frame rate fluctuates consistently between 40 and 60 FPS. It's pretty jarring and definitely noticeable while playing. In docked mode, the game runs up to 810p, and it's obvious that a lot of compromises were made to fit the game onto the hardware. Personally, the inconsistent performance made it tough for me to fully enjoy or even complete this game. That's why I'm really hoping for a Switch 2 upgrade, so I could experience Bayonetta 3 with smooth frame rates and hopefully a higher resolution. This game is incredible, super ambitious, with tons happening on screen at once. I love Bayonetta 1 and 2, and I want to enjoy Bayonetta 3 the way the developers intended, in the best, most polished form possible. Next, I want to talk about Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. Most people know this game doesn't perform all that well on the Nintendo Switch. With the new game announcement, Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, I think it's definitely time for Age of Calamity to get an upgrade. The frame rate in Age of Calamity often dips into the teens, making the gameplay choppy and frustrating for most players. It creates a very inconsistent experience overall. With Age of Imprisonment coming soon, it would be strange to play the new game on the Switch 2 and then go back to Age of Calamity only to deal with worse performance. So this is definitely one of those games that really needs a Switch 2 upgrade to bring it up to par. Next up, I want to talk about the highly successful Xenoblade games on the Nintendo Switch. These titles are absolutely massive in scope and ambition. Although I haven't personally played a Xenoblade game yet, I know they pushed the Nintendo Switch hardware quite a bit, which has unfortunately resulted in some performance issues. Given that Xenoblade is an ongoing numbered franchise, and many players like to experience these games in order, I believe all of them deserve updates on the Switch 2. Having a consistent, polished experience across the entire series is something fans would definitely appreciate and value. Next up, I want to talk about Doom on the Nintendo Switch. This is another impressive miracle port that managed to bring a demanding game to handheld hardware. However, it runs at a steady 30 frames per second and roughly 720p resolution, which is lower than what you'd see on most other modern consoles. Since these games perform much better elsewhere, I'd love to see Doom and its sequels carried over to the Switch too, so we can enjoy the full Doom experience on Nintendo's platform. And just imagine playing this high-octane first-person shooter with the new mouse controls on the Switch too. Now next up, let's talk about CD Projekt Red. If you've been following the latest Nintendo Switch 2 news, you know Cyberpunk 2077 is coming to the new console, and it looks incredibly impressive running on the Switch 2. Now with that being said, let's talk about a game that's even more beloved than Cyberpunk 2077, and that's, of course, The Witcher 3. When this game came to the Nintendo Switch, it was one of those miracle ports. Seeing such a massive open world RPG running on a handheld was genuinely impressive at the time. Of course, making that happen came with compromises, specifically in frame rate and resolution. This is where we started hearing that familiar phrase, those Vaseline-like or muddy textures that ambitious ports often had. And The Witcher 3 definitely had that look. But now that we've seen Cyberpunk running on the Nintendo Switch 2, I have no doubt that The Witcher 3 could run beautifully on it. So let's bring it over, let's upgrade it, because I want to see both of CD Projekt Red's flagship games looking and playing their best on the Nintendo Switch 2. Next up, I want to talk about some collections that came to the Nintendo Switch. First being the Metal Gear Solid Master Collection Volume 1. Now these are some of my favorite games of all time and many other people's as well. If you've ever heard of the name Hideo Kojima, that guy behind Death Stranding, these were the games that made him a household name in gaming. Seeing them finally arrive on the Nintendo Switch was a big deal. But while it's great to have these classics on the go, the Switch version came with some noticeable drawbacks compared to the other console releases. While consoles like the PS5 saw up to 4K and 60 FPS for these games, the Switch only saw up to 1080p and 30 FPS. So let's make Volume 1 shine on the Nintendo Switch 2. And while we're at it, give us Volume 2. You know we want it. Next up, I want to talk about a collection that's close to my heart. The Batman Arkham Trilogy. When this was announced for the Nintendo Switch, I was genuinely excited to finally play some of my all-time favorite games on the go. Both Arkham City and Arkham Asylum, originally PS3 titles, run fairly well on the Switch, maintaining a mostly steady 30 frames per second and reaching up to 720p in handheld mode, even if the frame pacing can be a little uneven at times. But then there's Arkham Knight, and honestly, it's an absolute travesty. The performance is plagued by frequent frame rate drops, sometimes dipping into the 20s, coupled with heavily downgraded visuals that fail to do justice to such an iconic game. It's disappointing to see such a beloved title struggle so much on Nintendo's hardware. With the Switch 2 on the horizon, it's the perfect opportunity to show goodwill to the fans and offer a free performance and resolution upgrade for Arkham Knight. This would not only redeem the Switch version, but also prove that these incredible games can truly shine on the next generation portable platform. We deserve to see Gotham at its best, so please make this happen. Now, the last collection, or rather collections, I want to talk about are the Resident Evil games available on the Nintendo Switch. These are classics that I really want to see carried over to the Switch 2 with improved frame rates and higher resolutions. Take Resident Evil 4 for example. It's one of the most iconic entries in the series, and it deserves to run at its absolute best on the next-gen hardware. Beyond just better visuals and smoother performance, the Switch 2's new mouse support opens up exciting possibilities. Imagine playing Resident Evil 4 with precise aiming using mouse controls, transforming the experience for both longtime fans and newcomers. So here's hoping that Capcom and Nintendo take full advantage of the Switch 2's capabilities, bringing these legendary games back with upgrades that make them feel fresh and responsive without losing their classic charm. Next up, I want to talk about Sonic Frontiers. This is one of the most ambitious Sonic games we've seen in a long time, which made it super exciting. But with that ambition comes challenges, especially when trying to cram this large, fast-paced open-world game onto the Nintendo Switch. Comparing the PS5 and the Switch versions is like night and day. On PS5, the game runs smoothly at 1080p 60 frames per second, with the option to go up to 4K at 30 frames per second. Meanwhile, the Switch in docked mode can only reach 720p and targets 30 frames per second, but often dips below that during intense moments. Add in frequent pop-in of assets while exploring the world, and the Switch version falls short of expectations. This is definitely another title that deserves a meaningful upgrade on the Switch 2. With more powerful hardware, we could finally see Sonic Frontiers as it was meant to be. Super fast and super smooth. Now I want to talk about Mario Maker 2. This game is all about building creative levels, precisely placing tiny elements just right, and fine-tuning every little detail. While the current Switch controls do a solid job, imagine how much easier and more intuitive level creation could be with the Switch 2's new mouse controls. Using a mouse would make selecting objects and editing layouts faster and way more precise. It could totally transform the creative process, making it more accessible for both casual creators and hardcore fans. And looking ahead, if Mario Maker 3 drops on the Nintendo Switch 2, I'm hoping Nintendo leans into these new mouse control options, opening up a whole new level of creativity and ease for players building their dream Mario level. And finally, the last game I'd love to see upgraded for the Nintendo Switch 2 is Dark Souls Remastered. It's incredible to have such an iconic game running on a handheld device, but when you compare it to versions on other consoles, it definitely falls short in both performance and visual fidelity. With the recent announcement of Nintendo partnering with From Software on the brand new exclusive The Duskbloods, there's even more reason to hope we'll see more Dark Souls titles and other From Software classics come to the Nintendo Switch 2, fully optimized and running in all of their glory. It would be amazing to experience these dark, immersive worlds on the go without compromise, and I'm excited to see what the future holds. So that wraps up my list of games that I think deserve upgrades for the Nintendo Switch 2. Whether it's for better performance, higher resolution, or new features like mouse support, these updates would go a long way in giving players the best experience possible. Let me know in the comments what games you'd like to see upgraded. And thank you for watching. Goodbye.